with the new balance changes, a lot of evolutions either became much weaker or much stronger. So today we're going to be ranking every single one of the 30 evolutions in Clash Royale, from the very worst all the way to the very best. Kicking off our list at number 30, and the very worst evolution in Clash Royale that you should never try to get, we have the Evolved Tesla. The Evolved Tesla is just so bad right now. Even in Xbow, there's so many better evolutions to play. Evolved Cannon just outshadows it in every single way possible. And a lot of the other worst evolutions got some sort of buff in the last balance changes or became just a little bit more viable in the meta, but the Evolved Tesla was not so lucky. Moving up to number 29 and in the D tier, we have the Evolved Pekka. The Evolved Pekka seems to be getting worse and worse as time goes on because I feel like with the base Pekka being so weak, it's hard for the Evolved Pekka to get that much value because you kind of need that extra range for the Pekka to actually be able to kill a lot of things. And now with the short range, you can just always kite it around, so the Evo gets next to no value, and I just think they nerfed Pekka a little bit too hard, but I'm not complaining. It was so annoying facing Pekka every single day for so many months. At number 28, we have the Evolved Goblin Drill. The Evolved Goblin Drill is really hard to run now ever since they took away the impact damage of the extra ghost drill spawns, and it feels like Drill's not really the best win condition in this meta either. The thing about the new Drill Evo is that it's so easily counterable by stuff like Goblin Gang, Guards, Skeleton Armies. If you don't have a poison to combo with it, it's basically useless most of the time, and even if you do have a poison to combo with it, it's a lot more easy to counter now. It's not like so random as it was at one point to where it would just get all this random goblin chip damage. At spot number 27, we actually do have the Evolved Snowball, which I'm sort of surprised about myself that I'm ranking it this high because it was the very worst evolution in Clash Royale in my last Evo's tier list, but I feel like it's a little bit better since last time. It has been actually used in some popular decks like Giant Graveyard that has been making quite a big return, and it got a little bit of a buff in the last balance changes to the amount of time that it slows down stuff for. It went from 3.5 seconds all the way up to 4 seconds. Now, I feel like Evo Snowball is still so bad in offensive situations, like it's kind of useless on offense most of the time, but what it's good at is defense, because if there's an E-Giant on your tower and you're playing Giant Graveyard, you don't really have many responses to it, so what you can sometimes do is just Evo Snowball that E-Giant, and it just will completely flush the E-Giant backwards, giving your troops much more time to kill it. So Evo Snowball is, don't get me wrong, very bad, but it's better than before. Moving on to number 26, and in the C tier, we have the Evolved Archers. Now, Evo Archers really don't seem like that bad of an evolution these days because arrows actually got a pretty big nerf, which does indirectly buff the Evo Archers quite a bit. I feel like people still use them a lot, but they're not as they're not just as damaging for these Archers decks these days because you can kind of space out your stuff a little bit better so they can only hit the Archers and not, you know, also your Cannon or Tesla or whatever. And Evolved Archers are pretty decent. They just don't really fit in a lot of decks because a lot of decks that have Archers don't have any extra arrows bait to force out those arrows on, and Archers themselves are kind of just a little bit lackluster in this meta. But you can see when Archers are used in stuff like 3.0 Xbow, the Evo Archers actually do a pretty good job. At number 25, we have the Evolved Wizard. Now, I did rank the Evolved Wizard pretty low in my last tier list, but I feel like it's not really that terrible. It's just that the meta doesn't really suit it too much. It doesn't really seem to do that much compared to Goblinstein. I feel like maybe once Goblinstein kind of dies off, if it gets enough nerfs, then maybe Evolved Wizard could be a little bit better. You guys can let me know what you think of it in the comment section, but I feel like Evo Wizard is not too bad. It's just that you have to play with a normal terrible wizard, every other wizard, in order to actually play the Evolved Wizard, which is the only thing that makes it not that good. Now, this one might be extremely controversial, but at number 24, we have the Evolved Dark Goblin. Now, I am basing some of these rankings just based off their statistics on Royal API, which is a website that shows statistics of Clash Royale. And Evolved Dark Goblin is really not used almost at all in the top 200 on ladder because it just dies so easily. Like, yes, it can be one of the strongest Evos in the game if your opponent has no responses to it, but what deck doesn't have the response to kill a loggable unit like a Dark Goblin that you can just, like, you know, log away, obviously. You can arrows away, you can poison away, you can fireball away, you can even NATO into your push to kill it. I just feel like everyone has a response to it, and because of that, even bait players have abandoned Evo Dark Goblin, practically. At spot number 23, we have the Evolved Battle Ram. I feel like the Evolved Battle Ram has been getting a little bit better as time has gone on. It's not used in Pekka at all these days, but it kind of found its place in this one really annoying bridge spam deck with the Elixir Collector, Archer Queen, and Evo Barbarians. So it doesn't do a bad job when it's in the right situation getting tanked for, and you're kind of overwhelming your opponent, but in a normal situation, it still doesn't get too much value, so I would say just a little bit below average evolution, but it's not bad. Now, for number 22, we have the Evolved Barbarians. I feel like the Evolved Barbarians have actually made a bit of a comeback recently. they have been starting to get some use in bridge spam, especially paired with the Evo Battle Ram that we were just mentioning. They were actually very popular last season and this season already in this one pump bridge spam deck. So they're not that bad, you know, they get the job done. They're not exactly a meta card, because I feel like the Barbs themselves just kind of suck right now, but if Barbs were actually a good card right now, I feel like the Evo would actually make them even stronger, a lot stronger. So I feel like the evolution itself is pretty good, although the Barbs kind of suck. Moving on to number 21, we have the Evolved Firecracker. The Evolved Firecracker actually should be a little bit stronger right now because of the Arrows nerf, obviously. I've been playing a little bit of Hog EQ recently, and it feels so much better now that Arrows got that big radius nerf. It feels like Firecracker is quite a bit more viable. And even against Arrows decks, you can still win using the Firecracker, so it's really not bad at all, but it's just a little bit hard to play Firecracker because you could give your opponent their King activation so easily, and the Evolved Firecracker does help you get a little bit more tower damage than the normal Firecracker, but not really too much aside from that, and Firecracker is really only viable in Hog Earthquake decks. Right on the dot at number 20, we have the Evolved Royal Giant. I feel like the Evolved RG is actually not too bad at all right now, especially with the new Evolved Hunter. It pairs perfectly with the Evolved RG, so potentially Evo RG could even be a little bit better than this, and I'm just underranking it, but yeah, I feel like it's pretty solid. You know, it's always scary to see an Evo RG at the bridge because you know that anything you play right on top of it, like a Knight, E-Barbs, or anything like that, will be a little bit less effective since it'll be constantly getting knocked back, and obviously it is kind of resistant to stuff like skeleton armies and things like that, so I think RG is a pretty good evolution right now. Coming in at number 19 and in the B tier, we have the Evolved Electro Dragon. The Evolved Electro Dragon is still not bad, you know, it still fits in a couple decks here and there, but it's not quite as good as some people make it out to be. Like, it will obviously wreck Lava Hound players, so Lava Hound players will think it's really broken, but for the rest of us, it's not the end of the world, and especially with the new Evo Hunter, I feel like people will be carrying Lightning much more often, which is going to suck for Evolved Electro Dragon. For spot number 18, we have the Evolved Mortar. The Evolved Mortar seems to do a pretty good job these days. Mortar is making a very, very small comeback. It's not really as good as it was towards the time of the 20-win challenge, but I have seen a good amount of Evo Mortar players start to pop up, and it still is a pretty threatening thing, but it just takes so much longer to shoot the first shot than it used to, which makes it just a lot more easy for your opponent to gather Elixir to defend, but overall, it's pretty solid. At spot 17, we have the Evolved Skeletons. Now, the Evolved Skeletons are a pretty interesting one. I feel like they're used in a good amount of decks, but they're not really that good, because there's a lot of decks that just don't really have much of a choice, and they kind of have to use Evo Skeletons, like sometimes 2.6 players or things like that, but they don't really seem to be that good compared to other Evos. It's just that they can fit in a good amount of decks. So I guess they are versatile, but having 3 skeletons, it's kind of hard to get them to actually chain on stuff unless you tank for them using an Ice Spirit or an Ice Golem, at least. Making her way to spot number 16, we have the Evolved Musketeer. Now, I feel like the Evolved Musketeer is definitely a little bit underrated. Maybe even I'm underrating her a little bit, because Balloon has been making quite a bit of a comeback, almost single-handedly, because of her. I mean, not Balloon, but like specifically Balloon's Cycle, because Balloon is always good in Lava Hound, but specifically Balloon's Cycle has been making quite a big comeback because of the Evo Musketeer. It's really good now for sniping stuff like the new Evo Hunter, you know, Evo E-Drags, even buildings, of course, and yeah, it's also made quite an impact in Giant Graveyard recently, so honestly, I might even have to move it up next time I do a tier list of evolutions. Right in the middle of the pack at number 15, we have Riley with a couple goblins in his backpack. Oh, I mean the Goblin Giant, aka the Goblin Giant, guys. The Goblin Giant evolution is honestly pretty decent, but the reason why I didn't rank it higher is because, well, one, it got a nerf a little while back, and also number 2 is that I feel like Giant has really been taking over the meta a lot recently and kind of replacing Goblin Giant quite a bit. I think the brand new Evolved Hunter does deserve to be at spot number 14. It seems like just a little bit above average as an evolution. The reason why it's not much more broken, guys, like you might think it would be, is because it takes a while to get to it, unlike, you know, the Evo E-Drag or something like that. You know, you get to the E-Drag every other cycle. For the Hunter, you have to cycle 2 of them, which does take quite some time, but when you play it in an RG cycle deck, you could still get to it a good amount throughout the game, and it can also really help you on stuff like offense, where you can just like immobilize a Pekka and get your RG straight to the tower. So it definitely is quite good, and it seems to have made a bit of a comeback in these minor poison quick cycle decks with stuff like Wall Breakers and things like that. Side by side, the Hunter at number 13, we have the Evolved Wall Breakers. I did rank the Evolved Wall Breakers quite a bit lower in my last tier list, but I feel like they've only been getting better and better as time has gone on. They're especially good right now in this one Evolved Hunter Evo Wall Breakers minor poison deck that I was just talking about a second ago, because that deck actually used to be really good back in the day, but now with the new Evo Hunter, it really has the defense it needs, and Wall Breakers are really able to shine with the evolution. The evolution got a buff a few months back, and I feel like people have not realized how good that buff made the wall breakers, because the fact that they can kill a Mother Witch using just the Evo wall breaker death damage is pretty insane. They can almost kill barbs too, just with the death damage alone, so if your opponent has no building, they're almost impossible to stop sometimes. At number 12, we have Leroy Curry, aka the Evolved Bomber. The Evolved Bomber is still pretty decent to this day. I mean, you can throw it in stuff like Goblin Drill, you can throw it in Giant Beatdown, you could throw it in a lot of different things like Electro Giant. It's not really the best, it doesn't win you games like it used to, but it's really an evolution that has no specific main deck, but that can fit in pretty much anything, and you know it will get a good amount of value compared to most other evolutions in the game. Moving on to number 11, we have the Evolved Goblin Barrel. On my last tier list, I had the Evo Barrel quite a bit higher, but the Evo Barrel got a very bad change. Well, not really a change, but it's just the fact that Dagger Duchess has been so popular recently on top ladder, and Duchess completely makes Evo Barrel useless, because an Evo Barrel, like the Decoy Barrel, gets no damage against Dagger Duchess. So that's really the main reason why Bait is not doing too good, and therefore the Evolved Goblin Barrel is not doing that good, but it's still a very broken evolution to have if you're facing the right tower troop. So now for our top 10, we have the Evolved Mega Knight, moving on to the A tier. The Evolved Mega Knight is still very good right now, but I've noticed that recently it has been seeing a little bit of a fall off. I'm not exactly sure the exact reason for that. I feel like it just doesn't really have the DPS that it needs. Like, I mean, the Evo Mega Knight obviously just knocks things back, so you're fine, but like, the normal Mega Knight doesn't really have the DPS you need for a lot of these matchups. Like against RG, it can really struggle, and even the Evo Mega Knight now can just get hooked by the Evo Hunter, and Mega Knight decks don't typically run Lightning unless it's like a Ram Rider deck, but when people run Mega Knight, they don't usually run Ram Rider with it. They usually have Minor these days, or just some sort of Prince Beatdown, so I feel like the meta has kind of just shifted out of Mega Knight's favor, and people have gotten a little bit better at sort of just pulling that Evo Mega Knight around the map, which makes it not too hard to counter, despite its pretty broken ability. At number 9, we have the Evolved Valkyrie. The Evolved Valkyrie actually was given to everyone for free, so any one of you guys can go test it right now. It's very, very good right now. It's very good in Logbait, very good in Lava Hound, and so many other minuscule decks that people don't really pay much attention to. I feel like Evo Valkyrie keeps on getting underrated even by people like me, and it just is very strong. Whenever you see it behind a big push, like behind a big Lava Hound push or something, you know you're in trouble, because it just brings everything, like all your ranged units like your Musketeer and stuff, right into their push, which makes it so hard to stop it, even on offense, and let's not even talk about how broken it is on defense. Making their way to the spot number 8, we have the Nibblers, aka the Bats. The Bats evolution is very nice right now. It's good in stuff like these Mega Knight bait decks that are not super popular, but still pretty good. They're good in the minor Wallbreaker decks with Poison and Hunter, and they're just very versatile. They can really be used in almost anything, to be fair. Like, they're not meta in almost everything, but they can be used in almost anything, is what I'm trying to say. And they seem to always get so much value because, yes, people do have spells to kill them, but a lot of the time people can't spell them down right away. So if they have like a, you know, Snowball or something like that, and they don't react instantaneously or don't have the elixir instantaneously, then Evolved Bats can be a lot of trouble. They're also really good in stuff like Mortar Bait as well. They're very versatile. Making a ginormous jump, we have the Evolved Recruits at spot number 7. The Evolved Recruits were becoming just stronger and stronger towards the end of the last season, and I feel like in this season they're only going to get even more strong, because some of the decks that were countering them with like the Evolved Cannon and stuff got a little bit of a nerf. Like, you know, the Log got a nerf, the Arrows got a nerf, the Cannon itself got a nerf, and yes, Recruits decks do oftentimes use arrows, but I feel like the arrows are still pretty much as good as before if you're good at aiming. If you have a sloppy finger and you just can't figure out where to aim, then you're going to struggle with Recruits now, maybe. But I feel like they're very, very good right now, and despite a few nerfs that they got, they're still able to just really wreak complete havoc on your opponent. I feel like people constantly mess up the Ice Spirits on the Evo Recruits because they charge so fast and they can one-shot it, and they're just very panic-inducing for the opponent. Coming in at spot number 6, we have the Goblin Cage Evo. The Evolution Goblin Cage is obviously going to be very strong if Evo Recruits are very strong, because those two basically go hand in hand. And yeah, Goblin Cage has just been making more and more appearances inside of the meta in all of these different beatdown decks, you know, making Golem practically come back in the meta. And the Golem being in the meta for a little bit was practically only because of the Evo Cage, I would say. And Evo Cage is just a card that, when your opponent has it in cycle, you just know you can't do anything. And also, like, these Splasher players keep on abusing Cage. Like, when they have it in cycle, you just know you can't do anything. Like, when I have Hog Rider, I just purposely play my Hog just knowing I won't get damage, because I know I can't break through an Evo Cage. Even with an Earthquake, you can't. And even if you have Lightning, the Goblin Brawler doesn't even fully die from that, which is kind of ridiculous. Now, in the top 5, at number 5 exactly, we have the Evolved Knight. The Evolved Knight seems to sneakily be starting to become quite a good evolution again. I mean, it was very, very broken for a while. It got so many nerfs, then it slowly faded out of the meta, but now it seems to keep on fading right back into the meta. And it just doesn't really feel like a very healthy evolution. Like, especially in these graveyard decks, they just go for that Evo Knight, and, you know, you have, like, your Musketeer on the Evo Knight getting distracted, and it just will never kill the Knight. And, like, they go for the Evo Knight on defense against your Archer Queen. Your Archer Queen, even with the ability, does, like, a tickle to the Knight. So it doesn't feel like a very healthy concept to me, and I feel like it could use maybe a very small nerf, in my opinion. At number 4, we have the Evolved Ice Spirit. I have been quite liking the Evolved Ice Spirit recently. I thought it was really broken back in the day, mainly because of stuff like Ram Rider being meta, so I thought cycle players just needed that Evolution Ice Spirit to have a really good defense, but it turns out that Evo Ice Spirit is still really broken, even though Ram Rider is really nowhere to be seen in the meta. The Evo Ice Spirit just gets so much damage on the tower if your opponent leaves it alone, and I love how it one-shots Spear Goblins, and it just has so many great interactions, like even, I believe, easily two-shotting minions, and it just all around very solid. Now for our top 3, at number 3 we have the Evolved Zap, making quite a big jump. I checked the stats for Evolved Zap, and I believe 1/5 or more of the top 200 players right now are playing it. I think, for the most part, Evo Zap is used a lot in Lava Hound, but it just seems to be making more and more appearances in, like, these random bridge spam decks with Lumberjack and stuff like that, and these random off-meta balloon decks. It's just so good. It just always allows you to kill stuff in combination with the arrows. And arrows, despite the nerf, are still very good, so what they do is they usually will get to that Evo Zap and have that ready to, like, you know, instantaneously kill Firecrackers for 2 elixir. It's basically like a 2 elixir arrows, and, you know, you can also Evo Zap and arrows to kill stuff like Musketeers, so it really just helps you take out basically any air defense cards, so that's why it's so good in mainly air decks. Taking the number 2 spot, we have the Evolved Cannon. Despite the nerf to the normal cannon, it seems like the Evo Cannon is still just being used as much as ever, and still has an amazing win rate. I think the Evo Cannon itself could use definitely a small nerf. Maybe they could kind of just go halfway back on that one buff they gave it, to where I think they made the barrage of the Evo Cannon do like 10% more damage or something. I would say they could go maybe halfway back on that, or even potentially reduce the range of the barrage from the Evo Cannon. It's kind of funny how you can also even hit your opponent's towers with it if you're gonna find yourself in a 1-to-1 situation. You can actually just go for it in the pocket and it will damage your opponent's tower. And of course, guys, at number 1, the very best evolution in the game, we have the Evolved Lumberjack. The Evolved Lumberjack is just incredibly good right now. Even after the nerf that it got a small nerf to where now when the ghost leaves the rage space, it goes away a bit quicker, it dies a bit quicker, but it still seems so good right now because it doesn't always even leave that rage circle very soon. Sometimes it just like stays in that rage circle for a while, killing something like a Musketeer or damaging down a Knight or something like that, and the Evo Lumberjack just has way too much pressure. It feels like you always have to spend at least like 1 or 2 elixir more than you would against a normal Lumberjack to counter that extra evolution ability it has, which just doesn't feel fair to me. Anyways, guys, that's going to be my tier list for today, so let me know in the comment section whether you guys agree or disagree, and make sure to like the video if you enjoyed. Bye!